All right, good to see y'all tonight. I'd like to turn our attention to the book of Genesis, chapter 32. Genesis 32. Sermon title is The Cost of a Counterfeit Name. I guess tonight we're going to be parked on the edge of a ravine again. This morning we watched David, that young shepherd, looking down in that valley of Elon. He refused the heavy, suffocating armor of Saul, and he chose a simple path of reliance on God. I guess we kind of challenged ourselves, to drop the armor, drop the bronze, stop fighting spiritual battles with these awkward, worldly, exhausting coping mechanisms. But tonight, we're going to be on a different riverbed. I want to look at a man that did the exact opposite of what David did. Okay? This is a young man that, he spent 20 years willingly wearing a facade, an armor that didn't belong to him. And, he was carrying a weight he was never meant to carry. It wasn't designed for him. And his name was Jacob. And to understand why Jacob finds himself here in this creek bed in the middle of the night, you got to look at kind of what got him there. Jacob, his name means grappler, means the supplanter, heel grabber. He was born as a set of twins. He was born second, reaching out of his mother's womb to try to pull his brother Esau back in so he could get out ahead of him. He spent his youth calculating, measuring, looking for leverage, trying to get over. He was always trying to, match the volume of the weight of the world around him. And the defining tragedy of his life happened in a dark, silent tent, standing beside the deathbed of his blind, dying father Isaac, dressed like his older brother. Esau's rugged clothing, had goatskin taped fastened to his arms to mimic his brother's touch. Jacob stepped into this counterfeit measurement that we kind of talked about a little this morning, and he stood there trembling and just lied to his father. And he did it to steal a birthright. And then he ran. He fled out into the desert, into the wilderness, and worked around here and there for decades. And he built up an immense fortune. Became rich. Possessions. People. And had thousands in his flocks and livestock and stuff like that. But every single ounce of his success was all built up on top of that foundational lie. He was a wealthy man that spent his life clanging around in somebody else's armor, only to be stripped raw. Here we're about to see in this middle ground. Talking about being a veteran or a beginner. Tonight, if you're a veteran, you know what that feels like. I think you know what it's like to build a life or a career or whatever, a reputation, and feel like it may not all be you. It's hard to sustain a blessing when it wasn't really generated from you. And we find in Genesis 32 here, 20 years has passed. The momentum of Jacob's lie has finally caught up to him. He's forced to turn and march back to his homeland where his brother Esau lives. And he gets word that his brother Esau is coming towards where he's at, coming towards him to meet him. The thing is, Esau is accompanied by 500 or 400 soldiers, okay, 400 men. Jacob does the math and don't really add up. Look at verse 22 and 23. Jacob, he got up, he took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, his 11 sons. They crossed this ford on the Jabbok there. And he sent them across the stream ahead with all of his possessions. Think about that. Jacob, he divides his family up, his servants, the vast wealth that he has, and he divides them up into companies, and he sends them off across this river at this ford. And he's hoping, what he's hoping to do is appease his brother who's coming up on the other side. In verse 24, see one of the loneliest verses in all of Scripture. And it's simply, so Jacob was left alone. He was there alone. And that in between, he's stranded right there. He's been able to get by on his cleverness. His cleverness has run out. His strategy has sort of run out. Coping mechanism and all that. It's all run out. Behind him back here is his uncle Laban, who he defrauded. In front of him is Esau coming towards him that he betrayed and stole the birthright from. So he's stuck in this space in between his past choices. And then he's got his future consequences fixing to lay out ahead of him. So in that silent, sort of isolated in-between space, you know, when you get in those situations, you can't pretend you're somebody else anymore. You just got to be you. And you're left alone in the weight of your own armor, if you will. And we see how the prison of a borrowed name, in the dead of that night, on that riverbed, out of the blue, out of the darkness, some stranger tackles him. The text don't say for sure who he is up front. It just says here, the man wrestled with him till daybreak. And this isn't a nice debate, no theological debate going on. This was a brutal, exhausting, bone-crushing grappling match. I mean, they were wrestling in the mud for hours. I mean, Jacob fights with everything he's got left. Look at how he fights. He's fighting in the same way he's always fought. His name is the grappler, the heel grabber. That's what he fights, clutching and grasping and finding leverage, just sheer willpower, trying to get through this night. He's wrestling. He's trapped in this prison of a borrowed name, and this guy's come along and he's wrestling with him. He thinks he can manipulate things. He thinks he can wrestle through this and even out-wrestle God himself. Look at verse 25. The man, when he saw that he could not overpower Jacob, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip so that his hip was wrenched out of socket as he was wrestling with this man. Whew! Ow! This location sounds awful to me. And what's ironic about that, just with a single effortless touch, that stranger disables Jacob's very source of leverage. You can't push, you can't lean, you can't grapple when your hip's out of socket. In an instant, there was Jacob, heel clutcher. He's undone. I mean, he can't fight anymore. He can just hang on. And that's what he does. He's changed from predator, trying to win this battle, to just this desperate sinking into the mud, trying to hold on. And hearing this stranger says, "Let me go because it's breaking day. The sun's coming up." And Jacob is pinned down. He's broken. His hip's out of socket. He's exhausted. And look at what he said. He cries out, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." And this is what has excited me about this passage over the last few weeks of studying through. This brings us to a pivot point of the whole night Jacob was in. You ever wonder why Jacob wrestled so hard all night? Why didn't he just quit? Why would he try to wrestle with him? Why is he so desperate? Why is he just so violently clinging on to this man in the mud? Because it's been so long. For 20 years. Every time Jacob looked out at his flocks, looked at his wealth, he has his little voice in his head saying, "That's not yours. You're a liar. You're a fraud." For 20 years, Jacob, he's been haunted by this possibility, that that blessing just didn't really feel like his. He knew who it was meant for. He knew he stole it. But what else? What if everything that he's built rested on stolen words? He wasn't just running from Esau's army. He was running from this echo of this stolen identity that he got. And he realized that this wasn't just about a physical threat. This was 20 years. This was a 20-year-old lie that he's going to have to deal with. What struck me as I looked at it this time, he was starving for an authentic word. And that stranger in verse 27 asks him a simple but so devastating question when you think about it. In verse 27 it says, the man just asked him, "What is your name?" Now, this was the Son of God. We know that. This was Jesus. This was God he was wrestling with. Was God asking him that to gain the information? God knew who he was. God knew his name. God was asking him for a confession. 20 years, Jacob had been introducing himself to everybody else. Well, that night, he had to introduce himself to himself. Just be who he was. Just think about what happens in that moment. What goes on in Jacob's mind? What's your name? The years roll back. That muddy riverbank fades out of his vision. And Jacob, in his mind, finds himself standing in a dark, silent tent 20 years ago. Because the last time an old man asked him in the dark, "What's your name?" He lied. He put on his better clothes, the goat skins, and he stole birthright. And when Jacob fled that night, his home, after he lied to his father, the last words that he heard from his father were the words of a blessing that weren't meant for him. And for 20 years, he's been living off this counterfeit blessing, this counterfeit identity. And here he is pinned down in the mud, and he cries out, "Bless me! It's been so long. I need a blessing in my life. I need my blessing. And for the first time, maybe we can sort of understand the desperation in his voice. What was going through his mind. This is not a man that's asking for wealth because he already had it. This is not a man that's asking for success because he already had it. This is a man who has spent 20 years feeling like nothing he has is really his. And he is starving for an authentic blessing. And he knows the game's over. Esau's coming, and he can't fake that. He sure can't dress up like Esau in this situation. And to receive a true, unburdened life from God, he has to finally confess to the reality of who he is. We see now, but then we see it. He steps into a true blessing when he finally drops it. There in that mud, he looks up at the Creator, catches him right in the eye, and he finally speaks his real name with meaning. What's your name? Jacob. I'm the grasper. I'm the deceiver. I'm the supplanter. I'm the heel grabber. I'm the man I've been trying to hide for 20 years. Look at verse 28. The man said, your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and humans and have overcome. The stranger blesses him there. Not with a stolen blessing meant for somebody else. Jacob got an authentic blessing designed for him. Verse 31. The sun rose above him and he passed Peniel. He was limping because of his guilt. The sun came up and cast shadows out across the land. And Jacob limps across the river to meet his brother. Jacob's body was permanently altered. To a beginner reading this story, a limp looks like defeat. A limp looks like weakness, doesn't it? Before that night, Jacob walked perfectly. But he spent his life running. After that night, though, he limped, but he stopped running. See, to a veteran, that limp is like the ultimate trophy of grace. Because Jacob, he walked down into that riverbed, dragging the crushing, exhausting weight of a 20-year-old life. And he walked out, traveling light. He may have had a broken body, but he was authentic. And he had a reliance on God like he'd never had. As a veteran, I think we might could look back on this life of faith we've lived and admit, if my choice was to live with the baggage that I tried to live with for so long, the trying to be something I wasn't that I had for so long, if I had a choice to do that or walk with a limp, I'd take a limp. If he was freed, he no longer needed to stand tall in his calculations because he finally knew what it felt like to be embraced and held by God. And that's what struck me from it's the tragedy of a counterfeit name. What do I mean? I think there's so many people, Christians in particular, who say they come into church and they sit on pews week after week after week, and they feel desperately empty. They're starved for a real blessing. I mean, they pray for peace, they listen to the songs, they sing the songs, they seek a word from God, but they leave just as hollow. Why? I wonder if it's because, like Jacob, they're at a place where they're living a life pretending to be somebody else. Wearing the mask. That's the tragedy of counterfeit name. Here's the thing, when you wear a mask, we hear about hypocrites, right? I've preached on wearing masks, and we know we shouldn't, but we tend to anyway. Here's the tragedy of wearing that mask, having that counterfeit name. A person living that counterfeit life, they cannot receive a blessing on an identity that they've made up. It's not real. Because every blessing that's spoken over that mask they're living in feels like it belongs to somebody else. When you live behind a performance, any praise given to you, any encouragement somebody offers to you, any blessing that's spoken over you, it can't penetrate your heart. Your soul immediately rejects it because you know deep down the blessing that's being given, the praise that's being given, is being given to the character you're playing, not the real you. So it can't move you, it can't touch you, it can't shake you. Honestly, it probably exhausts you. Because now that you've been praised for being this person that's not really you, this facade that you put on pretending to be somebody else, now that you've been praised for that, you have to perform and keep pretending so that you don't lose that blessing that was meant for the stranger. God won't bless Esau's clothes. God will only bless Jacob's skin. And we can talk about the dream and how Jacob was supposed to receive the blessing, but it wasn't going to be given because of the firstborn and the Esau and all that. I'm talking about the fact that he stole it. I've said this 1,000 times, and I'll say it 1,000 more if God gives me the opportunity. God will never, ever cause you to do the wrong thing to get you where He wants you to be. Never. And something remarkable. God didn't bless Jacob until, well, it wasn't because Jacob was impressive. It wasn't really because Jacob made it through the night wrestling. It was God blessed Jacob after he got honest. People look for God to touch their heart, heal their soul, touch their life, and make a difference in their life. But you know, God doesn't heal the person you're pretending to be. So the breakthrough here was not just his strength. The breakthrough was when he embraced the truth. He refused to keep this counterfeit identity. He refused. God loves just the raw, broken, limping reality of who you are. And He loves that who you are far too much to validate any kind of counterfeit you put on to protect yourself. Jacob spent 20 years trying to convince, or living with the fact that he convinced his father who was Esau. God spent one night convincing Jacob he didn't have to be like that. So this blessing came the moment that Jacob stopped leaning and holding on to that counterfeit, the mask, and he just owned it. Said, "I'm Jacob. I'm the supplanter. I'm the heel grabber." Because God can transform Jacob, but God can't transform the mask. He won't. God can transform your heart and mind. He can transform your life and mine, but He won't transform our mask. God doesn't ask us to become somebody else. I don't know, maybe He's asking us to quit pretending we are somebody. Because the blessing didn't come when Jacob lied and pretending to be Esau. The blessing when he finally admitted, "I'm Jacob." And he went from being the heel grabber to the one who wrestled with God. That's what Israel is. God renamed Jacob so he didn't have to hear that name anymore. And He can change your life and mine in the same way. We don't have to live the way we once did. But we've got to shake off the stuff that's causing us to be fake. We've got to shake off the mask. We've got to get beyond the pretending. "Oh, preacher, if people knew who I really was." Well, we may not know exactly who we really are, but God does. God's trying to get to the person in the sense. And the God that renamed Jacob to Israel, He's still in the business of meeting honest people on the riverbank. Real people. And when Jesus comes into your... I just feel like we have sanitized Jesus. Jesus, He was a wild kind of person. He asked people to do things that didn't make sense. And if you followed Him, you were going to be doing things that didn't make sense. He was countercultural. He called them to be honest and to just go out and be who they were and teach people about loving one another, even if they don't love you back. Well, that was totally against what people thought back then. He was more interested in having people be real. We say this all the time. God wants a relation. He's worried about your heart, right? And your heart's who you really are. Your heart's what's on the inside, not the facade, not the mask. He's worried about what's on the inside. He changes what's on the inside. If we can be honest. Just be honest with Him. Maybe He's asking us tonight, what is in it? Are you who you say you are? You still pretending, or are you going to be honest with who you really are? Such a moving time, such a moving moment, pivotal moment in Jacob's life. And I think that speaks to our life so much. What God can do with just our honesty. And why so often we might come and we might feel like, I feel distant from God. I feel untouched. I feel far away. And when we boil it down, we might realize, you know what, I've been faking it, son. I've been faking it. I've been playing with the sin. I've been holding on to the sin. I've been living the life with the facade that looks fine, but I go home, I get home, and I treat people this way. I say things like this. I watch things like this. I do things like this. And we're living this counterfeit life, and God is trying to convict us out of it, so we have to shut our hearts off to that conviction, and we don't feel Him. God won't bless the facade. He blesses the heart that's inside of it. What's your name? He said. We're so distracted today. I'm got to admit, I'm concerned about the length of our attention span. How often we just, watching screens and getting pulled off in all different kinds of thoughts and stuff like that. Just this constant flow of information, distraction. With all that going on, man, how do we hear that still small voice? With everything else that's going on. We don't like silence. People want white noise. Fan going when they sleep, and I'm guilty too. I have tinnitus ringing in my ears, and it helps me to have something that I can listen to while I'm sleeping and stuff. But we need to find some time where we can just be real with God, quiet with God, and give Him 15 minutes. And you're just not doing anything. You're being honest, not faking it. You're being honest. And let Him show you who you really are, and you can align that. What is your name? Who are you really? That's what I have tonight in this passage. Jacob and his life. So interesting. And it encouraged me to think about it, because I've often tried to put my finger on what it is when people want to try to live behind the mask, why they feel like they should, and how they just feel so disconnected. And that's what it is. They're so far behind the facade that they're more worried about the facade and the mask and counterfeit than they are being real with God and honest with God. And God blesses honesty. So I hope you were encouraged a bit by this. Maybe God opened your eyes and put His finger in some places where we could be more honest with who we are, so that we might feel God's blessing on our life even more. Because if we're living a real Christianity, and it ought to have a little bit of danger to it. If our Christianity is comfortable, that's not what the kind of life Jesus lived. His whole ministry was making people uncomfortable. If you'd like to pray, if you'd like to talk to me, I'm going to be up here for a few minutes. We can pray together. Any questions you might have, I'm here to talk, pray, whatever you might think. Does anyone have anything they'd like to share tonight before we close? Thank y'all. Let's all stand there and have a closing prayer.